My name is Nicole Hudgens, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for Texas Values, and I'm speaking in support of HB 922. Texas Values is the largest statewide organization focusing on faith, family, and freedom in the state of Texas with 100,000 supporters in all 254 counties. And tonight I'm speaking in favor of HB 922. One of the worst policies that was ever brought forth in our nation was no-fault divorce. The impacts that it has had on intact families is detrimental. What HB 922 does is simply ensure that when it comes to a divorce that there is mutual agreement, which means a better chance of having an intact family stay in place. Intact families experts have shown that when at all possible, when children are brought up in an intact family, they're more likely to thrive. They're more likely to do better in school. They're more likely to be a better citizen. You see teen pregnancy rates go down. You see academic scores go up. The breakdown of the family is a breakdown of our society. In fact, former president stated, "We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit a crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teenage parents themselves, and the foundations of our community are weaker because of it." So you have a need for fathers, you have a need for mothers. Mothers provide bonds necessary for boys to learn how to respect women, daughters and sons who grow up. Boys and girls need the special bond with a parent. So I encourage this committee to vote in favor of this bill. It simply ensures that when we're talking about divorce, that both parties are agreeing and we have a better chance of having intact families.
I think Ms. Kalani has a question.
Why do people get divorced?
There are a number of reasons you could get divorced, but you have insupportability, which is no-fault divorce, but this is not talking about, in the case of abuse or in the case of neglect, others. This is simply talking about no-fault divorce.
Right. But what do you think the reason for that is?
It can be a number of reasons
Just
for
one of
no-fault
them.
divorce.
Like a reason that people would get divorced, other than abuse. If they're not going to say abuse, that they...
neglect.
If you're coming from the Family Law Foundation, then...
Texas Values.
Okay, Family Texas Values, and you're against divorces. So what type of divorces have you seen that are insupportable? What was their reason for wanting to get divorced?
There could be a number of reasons. We're for the government promoting a policy that keeps intact families as much as possible. So it could be a reason, it could be a number of reasons. It could be, right now you can get divorced for pretty much any reason.
Right, but what would just be one reason that somebody might get a divorce?
A lot of people would say it's complicated.
Okay, but what would be complicated about it?
One person says that they don't want to be in the relationship anymore.
Okay, would you consider that to be a disagreement?
You could say that.
Okay,
in some cases.
So if that's the reason, then if this bill were to pass, it defeats the whole purpose.
I'm saying that when you have a better chance of intact families, this is just simply meaning that both parties agree. And when both parties come into an agreement, they need to keep their agreements because it's not just them that's affected, it's kids that are affected. And so as a government, we can promote a policy that's going to help keep intact families. This is not saying that there will be no-fault divorce. This is simply saying that when it comes to a no-fault divorce, both parties should agree.
But if they're wanting to get a divorce, it's because they're not able to agree.
But that's just it. If both parties agree to get a divorce,
right, so that means one person files, they're not agreeing. If the other person says, "I don't want to," then this would hold the other person in that marriage.
But the fact
which would also, to go back to your point about the children, which is very important, ACEs, which was mentioned earlier, some of the top ACEs are emotional abuse, domestic abuse, mental illness, parental substance abuse.
But we're not talking about abuse.
Okay.
That's a different category.
But people that are...
divorce.
Okay, right. But that doesn't mean that those people that are in an abusive marriage, that they're going to come forward and say, "Hey, I'm abused." Not over and over and over again. What do we hear from abused women that end up murdered? Why didn't she leave?
But the difference is that if you're being abused, you can file for divorce. That's not what this bill is doing.
You can file for a divorce, but that's not the way abuse works.
You can only testify from up here, otherwise you have to be quiet. Well, I'm going to ask you to leave if you keep talking. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
People in abusive relationships don't come forward. People in abusive marriage, they try and escape the best that they can. Some of them are able to get out. This provides that possibility for them. Okay, when you're in an abusive marriage and you have someone that says, I want to leave because guess what, I don't want to be hit anymore. Guess what? That guy can say, nope, not going to do it. So she's supposed to go to the court and say,
you're not understanding the point of the bill, Representative. That's not talking about abuse. Abuse, she can go file.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't think you're understanding what I just said. Someone that's in an abusive marriage is not necessarily going to come forward and say, hey, I'm being abused. That's something that does not happen. 9 times out of 10.
Disagree.
Really?
There are those who have been abused and who do file for divorce.
And they use it under insupportability because they don't want everybody to know, guess what, this guy's been beating me up and doing all of these things to me.
The way that the law is written and the way that this bill is, they still can. But you also have to consider the fact that 1 out of every 2 of my generation has had to deal with no-fault divorce simply because people want to leave and they don't want to keep their commitments. And the impacts that it's had on my generation have been detrimental. And so I would say that when it comes to insupportability, this bill provides that both parties can agree. If there's an abuse, absolutely, and I would back you up 110%. If there's abuse, they should be there and they should be able to file, and I've had friends who've had to do it. But when we're talking about policies that the government should be supporting, we think that we should do policies similar to 922, actually 922 itself, so that we can try to at least keep families intact so that my generation and future generations don't have to continue to see the problems with
I don't think
divorce.
you're understanding. Okay, abusive women do not come forward in the majority of cases. So they are given this opportunity to go ahead and file divorce without having all of their dirty laundry filed throughout the entire court system.
Representative Canali, I think there's some great ways. Kalani, I apologize. I think there's some great ways we could help educate women, and I've seen women who've gone through some really tough divorces, and they stood up for themselves. And the way that we can empower women who are in those abusive situations to help them stand up for themselves, I'm in agreement with you on that when it comes to abuse. But when it comes to government promoting policies that protect kids, I want to see intact families stay intact as much as possible, and that's why I'm supporting this bill.
I think you're just not thinking about the fact that the majority of women are not going to come forward and say that they're being abused. And so this provides them an avenue to escape an abusive marriage without having that.
And I would say I'm speaking on behalf of kids who have been impacted by divorce, and that's where we're in disagreement.
And I'm speaking in part of women that have been abused and also children that are in part of families where their moms are being abused, and they probably don't want that to continue on.
And I would totally agree that it shouldn't continue on, which is why there are provisions in the law that ensures that that woman should be able to get out of that relationship.
Okay. There are provisions in the law. However, they'd have to prove it, and some things are not provable. We actually just heard them in Homeland Security, and we talked about strangulation and how you can't always see it. Okay, so there are lots of different types of abuse that can happen both emotionally and physically that are very difficult to prove.
Well, I think it would be a great idea to figure out how we can help those women prove, but at the same time, keeping in mind the impacts that no-fault divorce have had on the country and in my generations and the ones to come.
I think the impacts are, no, I just completely disagree with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other further questions of Ms. Hudgens, members? Not hearing any. Thank you, Ms. Hudgens, for being here.
Thank you.